But my name is Leon. I run Pass the Gun Deacon on Blue Sky, and as I mentioned, I do Japanese PC game history quite a lot of the time. This year I wanted to do something a bit more laid back, and I figured what's more laid back than going out to the turf and taking the rays, getting ready for that first drive on the tee box. Why not? Right here is my co-host, Henry Penico.
I'm a MAGFest veteran. Previously, I used to help run the Falcom panels, if any of you have attended those. He was also a panelist on those.
Yep.
Excited to join him on this fun little panel here today.
All right. So, one example I love to bring about with just the sheer ubiquity of golf as a genre in the video game sphere is the sad case of the Tandy Video Information System. This was a very short-lived, multimedia-focused console sold to a variety of just people anyone who needed something to play dentist videos on in the office, essentially. You had quite a few entertainment titles for the system, but only what you would probably call two main games. There was a port of Cyan's The Manhole, one of the predecessors to Myst, and this big ditty, Link's The Challenge of Golf, which originally came out for DOS PCs in 1990, developed by Access Software. And I find it a little sad, but also really fascinating that at the very least, if you have nothing else on your system, there's always golf. So, why golf games? Actually, right here. Okay, right. There we go. Okay. As the slide is pointed out, it's everywhere, and yet, while you don't think about it all the time, of all the sports genres I can think of, this is the one that has the most iteration. If you're a new developer and you want to make something that has a degree of physics calculation, simulation, this is guaranteed to put you through your paces. It's also adaptable. It can be mini golf, it can be more traditional course, first 9 or all 18 holes, etc. You can do a wide variety of play context, single player, multiplayer, career mode, fast match play. It goes on. And it has evolved so rapidly and visibly over the decades that it gives you a great glimpse into just where the industry has gone and how developers have adapted over time to meet different market demands. So if you've played Mario Golf, if you've played the Neo Turf Masters down in the arcade, and if you've played Putt Party on Discord just to get something done for the night with your friends, I know the feeling. This panel is for you, I would hope so. We've got basically 5-ish big sections. We're gonna start with we're gonna basically go into the very origins of golf as a sport, how it started at lawn sports and then became a proper institution as developed by the Scottish and then across the whole rest of the Americas and Europe and Japan. We're gonna go into the very earliest games from the turn of the 70s up through to the middle of 85. Then we're gonna deviate a little bit into mini golf, which I know sounds a bit strange, but it'll make sense when we get there. Then finally back into the meat grinder, the links, the Tiger Woods PGA Tour series, all of that stuff. And finally we bring it around to what is Frog Golf? What is Ribbit King? What is the state of Mario Golf in 2025 going forward? All right, so what is golf? You don't pick up a ball and throw it, and I've always found that very confusing and depressing. This is why we have arms, but we can also extend ourselves. We can use metal appendages, I suppose. Wooden appendages if you were living back in medieval times. Golf started essentially as a more extensive form of the lawn sports you were already seeing, such as Pall Mall, or in the case of, or even to an extent, curling and what would become bocce. The idea being, if you were a peasant working out in fields, or middle-class merchants or gentry at a time when that was a rarefied demographic, you could say, okay, we're not getting our hands dirty, let's just get a tool and whack at it. And there were quite a few early candidates for what you would call the original golf. The prototypes we see here is the Dutch example, Colvin, which it's still played in some contexts in some clubs across the Netherlands. An example you probably will never see in the modern context is Taiwan, which is the Chinese golf-ish type game that almost feels like a mix of polo, pall mall, and what would later become more standard. This does bring us finally to St. Andrew's Golf Links in the eastern part, I believe the northeastern part of Scotland, where in the 18th century, a bunch of people just hanging around this lovely country manor thought, we can take these beaches and play a little fun game of ball going across the beach side, and they had lots of ideas, and they put them all in a big old charter. They signed their names on it. Other people thought, we can do this too. We can have country clubs across Scotland as well. And some British people were there and thought, yeah, let us in. Oh, okay, we'll go back home and do it ourselves. So by the 19th century, the whole sport had finally reached North America just through cultural osmosis. Leisure trade across the Atlantic brought a variety of different players and evangelists for the sport from Scotland and Britain. And that whole era of the British Commonwealth spreading the same leisure trade across the world meant golf appeared in places as far-reaching as India and, predictably, Japan once they had opened up their borders to existing Western traders beyond just the one Dutch column factory in Nagasaki. So we got some more modern pictures here. What's going on? The Meiji Restoration in the middle of the 19th century saw Japan trying to adopt Western customs and forms of engagement in order to build up soft power that they realized they had lost through isolationism. And the merchant class and nobility quickly latched on to golf as a gentleman's sport that would give them prestige. It would give them something that they could easily broach in a conversation. Up through the Taisho era, so up through the 1920s, prior to World War II, Japan had a growing golf scene, and then the war interrupted all of that. Essentially the same, it mirrors what happened with the Roaring Twenties in North America, and to an extent also the kind of economic rebuilding that happened in between the world wars. Eventually, though, everyone suffered as a result of World War II, except us, predictably, and that led to a big post-war resurgence in the sport, where now you have modern means of institutionalizing the whole sport into multiple series, connected country clubs, more publicly accessible courses for, the poors. You can't afford a membership, you can still play golf. It all works out in the end. That brings us to today. And briefly, this is an interesting anecdote to pull up. During the 1980s, golf had become so ubiquitous and in Japan during their economic boom that by the tail end of it, people were buying golf club memberships simply so that they had the chance to have a financial instrument. They could have real investment leverage if they just got the membership to a club, but then actually had to attend it all the time. That's the level of luxury prestige that this whole sport tends to lend itself to. So where does this bring us to golf games? Well, we got very, very early stuff. And right in the middle left, we have an early driving range simulator. It's electromechanical. It has electric components, but no heavily digitized video-based components underpinning it. This was actually produced by Sega at the latter half of the 60s. Obviously, we have a bunch of progenitors to the ball game, the sports ball game in video form with Tennis for Two, but also some interesting text-based games that more so attempted to mathematize the actual every part of the golf round and every interaction you do, setting your power for your downswing or calculating the stance, all these things that we normally just, if you actually do play golf, you're just simply going to put into muscle memory, but with very early digital systems, you have to intentionally abstract and spread out right on the screen to make it more obvious. The bottom right example is an early networked golf game used by the University of Indiana, I believe, Champlain, for their Plato system. This was a series of mainframe terminals that students could use for a variety of tutorials and lessons, classroom stuff, but also their own creative apps. Long history of the earliest multiplayer RPGs, for instance, were on Plato, and we have an example of that with golf as well, where players can network together and play around. And at the turn of the 70s, even the most bored researchers thought, okay, I need to learn how to work this programming language. I'm going to make golf work on this mainframe or this mini computer right in the back of the research facility I'm at. Focal Golf is an early example of this, made for the PDP-8, which was a pretty common research and corporate mini computer, about the size of this whole section right here. Just a big old hunk of machinery. They needed to run a very simple but pretty well-developed golf game. It is the first, as far as we know, that actually lets you build out a golf course and save that to like a magnetic tape and share it. Now, finally, we get to TV games. There were some earlier electromechanical golf games and attempts to digitize it early on, but as far as I know, the first major golf game to come out in any consumer context is Computer Golf for Magnavox Odyssey 2. It's very straightforward. You wait for the little guy right there his animation has to go up. If it goes all the way up, the swing happens automatically. You have to time it right to get the right amount of power. You don't have any power bar, and all your aiming is relative to where that guy is going circular around the ball. Good luck. Very much in the same vein as that, we have Golf for 1980, Atari VCS. In a lot of ways, this is a variation on the previous title, almost to the point of, I don't know if imitation is a sincerest form of flattery, but in this case, it's not particularly flattering. It wasn't a particularly high seller, although it did have a decent trail over time just via bundle deals and the aftermarket. More notable than any of the other earliest console golf titles is PGA Golf, which was heavily advertised by George Plimpton and the rest of the Intellivision marketing team at Mattel, and they were very right to be proud of it. Of all the initial batch of sports games that really marked the Intellivision as a potentially dominant console at the time, PGA Golf was the most advanced compared to all of its other contemporaries. You had a proper two-click swinging system that actually lets you decide, okay, what's the power? And then finally, what's the accuracy? Am I gonna hook or slice? If I time it right, am I gonna get a nice straight shot? You finally had that element, at least if you could get used to the 9-digit phone controller on the television with the dial. Some people just balk at that. Not me. I'm a fool. I like to toy with that kind of thing. This was a very successful game for the system relative to many other exclusives for it. Meanwhile, in the arcades, you do have our first Japanese developer, in this case, Data East, proving that you can take this kind of quick stroke play system and make it really fun and immediate for an arcade audience. This ran on something called the Data East cassette system, which lets operators switch games in and out just off of cassette tapes, which obviously made for a cheaper end product for them. It was very convenient. You had to wait a little bit, but then the game loaded, and kaboom, you have a pretty solid little early golf game of note. This leads into just the general early PC golf boom, which I think is best crystallized by what a bunch of the earliest Japanese developers were doing with the sport, especially as it was coming fully into vogue with a new generation. Basically, the tail end of the baby boomers and Gen Xers over in that country were coming of age right when the Japanese real estate bubble was starting to explode. And that itself led to, as shown in this little thumbnail over here, as I mentioned before, everything to do with buying golf club memberships as financial speculation, which just sounds crazy every time I say that. And we have two examples here. At the top right, we have a early Hudson Soft game called Super Golf. They made these for a variety of Japanese PCs. They just ported it across machines by NEC and Sharp and Fujitsu. We have a couple of names that are going to be more familiar here. On the bottom right is one by Technosoft, the people who do the Thunder Force games. This is one of their earliest software pieces. And the bottom left is the first, it looks kind of garish. It's by T&E Soft. Remember that name, it's going to be important. But hello, okay. But for now, I'll give it over to Henry for this.
So this is one of the earlier Falcom games called Computer the Golf. Mm-hmm. And this one actually has an official or unofficial fan translation now by the Geofront team. Yep. So you can actually go play that in English right now if you really wanted to.
This is the same Nikon Falcom, famous now for the Trails of RPGs, Ys, Xanadu. Back in the early 80s, they hadn't really found their brand yet, and why not just take some golf game that a customer was working on and make that their own product? If it works, it works. I'm not complaining. I played it, it's fun. I have played it enough of this to know that it's practically unplayable, but they tried. T&E Soft was founded by a couple of brothers who were really into golf, and while they were still going to become more famous for, or infamous for, games like Hide Glide, early on, they had golf simulations like this, which rendered very slowly on these very ancient, few megahertz at best PCs, but strive for a level of realism and graphical detail that would soon become very important to the genre, now that we're heading out of the more abstract or just text-only basic looks. We have another early example of cross-platform pollination with Hole-in-One by HAL Laboratory, who you obviously might know for the Kirby series of games today. Back in these times, they still did a variety of genres, just experimenting and working on different systems like the MSX series of computers. And there's a larger screenshot, cover art for the sequel to the original Hole-in-One. This is yet another early game that lets you build out courses. You would share, this game came on a cartridge, so I hope the batteries have lasted long enough that people can still play their old golf courses. I sincerely hope so. Speaking of HAL Laboratory, here's Satoru Iwata. He worked there. He made games for Nintendo there. He made NES Golf. He was the programmer and, as far as we know, the lead designer of what would become the best-selling and arguably most influential console golf game that I can really think of. You have, with NES Golf, the introduction of the 3-click system of actually doing your swing or your putt. You click once you've actually found you've rotated the player character to get the angle right. You click again for the power bar, and then you click again, finally, to get that magical shot within the accuracy part of the power bar, and you can get a hook and a slice that way. This power bar system is going to be found even in the most, at least until more recently, up in some of the most realistic golf games out on the market.
Quick thing, fun fact about this is on the Nintendo Switch, there was at one point a thing where if you did Iwata's pose on his birthday, it would allow you to play this original golf game, but unfortunately that's been removed now.
I disagree with that decision.
Same.
We have some sequels to this, particularly on the Famicom Disk System, which didn't use a cartridge slot, but instead lets you use quick disks, variation on floppy disks. So that was one way they could cheaply put out expansions on the same formula. I want to talk about a different Japanese golf game designer for a little bit. His name is Masashi Morimori, and he will become important later when we talk about Hot Shots Golf, for which he is kind of the mastermind. Back in the early 80s, he was simply a high school and then college engineering student who got into working on PCs, learning how to code, and realized, oh, I can make a game. Well, it's fun. My friends are doing it. People without computers are doing it somehow. So that leads to number one golf, which is Enix of Square Enix. They published his golf game in 1984 for the Sharp X1. And that, after seeing NES Golf on the Famicom and realizing this system that Iwata and HAL Laboratory have put together is probably a lot more convenient for players, Morimori quickly went over to Enix again said, I'm going to make you a sequel. It's going to be a new series. It's going to be called World Golf. World Golf came out in 1985 for a variety of Japanese PCs, particularly the PC-88, and became a pretty successful series for Enix at the time. Considering the sales of their other series, it was doing pretty well. And as mentioned, World Golf in particular had a kind of a campaign. You would take your golfer across various tournaments. You would start small scale and build up to the big leagues, and you could get new equipment over time, build that career, things that ultimately pan out to a greater extent in later games. Here we have a competing example from Telenet Japan. These are the people who would later make the Valis games for a variety of consoles. Early on, they were still trying to ride off of the bubble golf boom, and Albatross it's a decent little one. I have toyed with this at a time, but in the meantime, people like SNK and other arcade manufacturers were trying to pare down golf to the golfing formula derived from NES Golf into an even faster format. Legion of Indo's Fighting Golf is a great example of this. You now have a behind-the-shoulder view for the golfer, which was quite nice to see for a Famicom game at the time. We have a variety of colorful characters that you can play as. Obviously, when this loads, we have the inspiration for some great pop culture moments.
Of your swing. I suggest Feathered Touch. You have entered Power Drive. Now, push 7, 8, 7 to swing.
It's a great shot.
Ball is in. Parking lot.
I'm sorry, Bart. You gotta learn how to play this, though.
Now enter the force of your swing.
One thing that about golf games that's fascinated me is if you're an indie developer or you're starting to learn how to program, it's one of the most enticing to develop initially, just as a way to get your feet wet. You have to deal with a lot of physics calculations and figure out if you're under performance duress, do you truncate some of this math to make everything more performant? Do you instead say, I'm going to painstakingly emulate every bit of the calculus here so that it can all be as realistic as some hardcore players would expect? But also, there's the very puzzle-like nature of golf compared to a lot of other sports. Not to say that other sports don't have puzzling elements, but in the context of a video game where except for the most motion-based or simulation-based examples, you're going to instead be using button presses and more labored commands to actually do the golf move, to actually do a round of golf. You have to think more in analytic terms. You have to look from the top-down view of the map more often than you might expect, versus if you and a caddy were out on the course. And obviously, you get to play around with a lot of different ideas, different control methods. It can be a lot of fun. It can be, it's not that glamorous. It's golf. But it's reliable. In worst case, there's always time for mini golf, which a lot more people are probably a lot more exposed to because every kid's family entertainment center, which is in Chuck E. Cheese, it would seem, would have a golf course attached to it. Mini golf mainly became a thing during the Great Depression in North America. It did have a spread to Europe following World War II, but it had its early peak, basically coinciding with the peak of the early roller coasters. This was jazz age leisure stuff that it would let you get a drink, go out and have some fun, not worry too much about weather conditions or having to dress super nice. It was accessible to the rich, it was accessible to the middle class, it was accessible to some of the poor. It didn't last perfectly. The World War and the Great Depression got in the midst of that, but obviously mini golf courses are everywhere. I don't need to tell you this. I do need to tell you about some of these strange, almost Pong-like early mini golf games that took advantage of the even simpler format to get away with what they couldn't, trying to do a more realistic golf game instead. This leads to some interesting experiments like a pool game that also doubles as a mini golf game. developed by Compile, who would later be known for Puyo Puyo. So this was back in their period where they did a lot of contract games, contract development as well. I believe that, this was published by Pony Canyon, a record label in Japan, during the Famicom boom. And as you can see right down here, we've got, we have a variety of pool balls you just have to sink into your choice of hole, and a variety of other obstacles you can bounce around. We get to something like Will Harvey's Zany Golf, which appeared on multiple systems, especially the Sega Mega Drive, the Genesis. And this is where electronic art starts to enter the picture. They would become much more relevant going into the 90s, but for now, it's just Will Harvey's Zany Golf. It's pretty zany. We've got a burger in the corner. You gotta pass the ball under that burger that's gonna be jumping up and down, because this is what happens in mini golf. Likewise, you have a variety of eccentric environments. You also have a continuing feature, which, to say the least, vexes me just to think about. You have to play pachinko for the game to decide if you're allowed to continue the game after going above par. It's not fun. Likewise, though, in Japan, you have similarly interesting takes on mini golf. This is by Compile again. Later on, they had a series of monthly media magazines you would get on a floppy just via mail order. This was called Disc Station, and a recurring series they had was just Marvel Putt Golf, their mini golf staple. The top left example is for PC90, and the top right example is from the Windows 95 days. That's how extensive this became. By that point, we had developers like Dynamics, who had previously worked in the flight sim and RPG spheres, working on more casual-oriented mini-golf games, taking advantage of the fact that you can put these games on CDs now and have nicer sound and visuals. Published by Sierra, of course, because Gabriel Knight wasn't selling enough. I don't know. Which finally brings us to, not Dynamics and Sierra. Oh no, that's Nintendo. Maybe some other reality. HAL Laboratory developed this for Nintendo, essentially to create a kind of, another party-friendly Kirby game, much the same as Compile did for them with Kirby's Avalanche, which was just reskinned Puyo Puyo. But make no mistake though, Kirby's Dream Course, it's devilish, it's mean. I had played enough to know those holes are uncompromising. Crazy Ace Miniature Golf, meanwhile, just kind of sat in obscurity because it was attached to the Atari Lynx. They weren't all going to be super successful, and by 1993, I can't think of many people who were buying an Atari Lynx for old or new games. But this just goes to show the growing ubiquity and frequency of mini golf releases, even on more underpowered or aging platforms. Case in point, even as late as '97, the Super Nintendo was getting really interesting little golf games like this one, which was a Satellaview exclusive. It has thankfully been archived and is playable if you know where to look. And it has several interesting course worlds to go through with a lot of really fun obstacles to deal with. Of course, you might recognize this more in the context of party mini games in other larger games, such as in the Monkey Ball series, or as an activity add-on for Discord users, and so on and so forth. Basically, it leads us to stuff like this, Fun Mini Golf by Shin'en for WiiWare and later for the 3DS. This is getting a bit farther afield into the realms of motion control. We're not quite to the point where we have to talk about the full range of motion, but we still have, a nice, accessible, family-friendly little party game. And of course, you can do some crazier variations on it. Worms Crazy Golf was based on a Java mobile game just called Worms Golf, later expanded into the full shebang, where you use a variety of Worms series power-ups and the same iconic tank controls or tank shooting controls that this series is known for in order to actually get your golf into the hole, all while dealing with other worms trying to get in the way. This is probably going to be a bit more recognizable. By this point, Team 17 realized we could probably do something with a lot more of this mini golf, and that leads to them working with Blacklight and Golf with Your Friends. This was probably the most popular Steam golf game on Steam, just across both categories. It's very, very moddable. A lot of people stream it. I have played some games with my friends in it. It's hard to really argue against it. On the other hand, I don't have a VR headset, so I'm not sure this is as amazing as I've been told. But Walkabout Mini Golf is probably the premier example of the genre in VR at the moment. I haven't seen any usurpers of the throne coming forward. And that brings us to the other competition, which is in the realm of traditional golf. We have Mean 18 by Accolade in the top left. In the bottom left, we have Arnold Palmer Tournament Golf. That's Golfomania for the Master System. And at this point, we're going to start getting into the meat and potatoes of where the genre headed into the 90s. EA is going to be a big factor. Other developers like Access will become big players as well. And this is where the sheer advancement of technology starts to make itself the most obvious contributor to what the golf game would become. And it all starts all the way back in 1986 with Leaderboard. This is an early, pretty affordable, but still relatively thorough and realistic golf game, introducing the behind-the-shoulder view that would become very common going forward. Who developed this? It's the Carver brothers. These guys, basically, much like Jordan Mechner, who worked on Prince of Persia, realized that they could use recordings of motion recordings and film and rotoscope that to create the animations for the actual golfers. This, alongside doing increasing amounts of course photography and mapping, eventually going to laser scans, and doing some very clever optimization of their engine to make these elaborate, very nice looking golf games actually run on machines people could afford. That led to them basically carving out a niche as having the most prestigious mainline golf series on PCs, and to an extent also on consoles in Western markets. The Lynx series would go from the turn of the 90s up through to 2004, which we'll see later on. Of course, if you want, you can always just hang out with Jack Nicklaus. He's got some things to say every time you boot up the game, I guess. Accolade had this series basically go all in on course building. Jack Nicklaus was a very well-known course designer in addition to being a very successful golfer. And so you get, as an example in the bottom right here, just the beginnings of a somewhat usable and powerful course builder that gets expanded going into the Windows years on those installments. Microprose also dabbles in a bit of David Ledbetter's greens, or just Microprose golf on all of these systems. And this one's interesting because previously these golf games would have you swing, the ball would move a little bit, the sprite goes into the background, and then the view snaps, it jump cuts to where the ball is going to land. Now we have a simplified view that in real time, 3D, shows the ball actually moving to where it's going to be. So it's a little bit more cinematic finally. This brings us finally back to Japan, where we talk about T&E Soft. At this point, they had their fill. They had Hide Glide. They was doing well, if you can believe that. And they figured, okay, let's go back to golf, because the founders of the company were all into that. Now they have more powerful systems. Let's do our own hyper-realistic golf sim series. And so the True Golf Swing, or True Golf Classics franchise is born. It comes out in various installments across multiple platforms, especially systems even as obscure as the 3DO. And of course, as I mentioned, Jack Nicklaus and Lynx are competing. PGA Tour is coming into the picture finally. We have one of the PGA Tour, I think that's PGA Tour 96 in the bottom right here, correct me if I'm wrong. EA is starting to heavily market and start tying their PGA Tour games to current, touring champions of the field. And you might have seen it down at the Arcade Expo this weekend. Golden Tee becomes a thing. Incredible Technologies figures out how to put an accessible trackball-based golf sim into a variety of bars and game centers, arcades, all the like. Yeah. Even before then, though, in 1988, on the most advanced of these PCs, you could play a full-blown career sim. When I mean full-blown, I mean everything from you're applying to country clubs, you're networking with people, you're going to events to get connections.
Sponsorships?
Yeah, sponsorships. Why not? And you play real golf. It's overhead, but it is the real deal. This is a whole decades-long be able to create a character and play out their whole golfing life simulator this early. It got iterated on, of course, for the PC 98, and that itself, I wish I could play it much easier. It's all Japanese menus. Then you have much simpler golf games that nonetheless still try to add something that kind of makes them stand out. Telnet comes back strong with Super Albatross. This is on PC Engine CD, the TurboGrafx CD. That's the same year East 1 and 2 came to the TurboGrafx CD. It had all the cutscenes and the voice acting. Let's do that for our golf game. It's a pretty straightforward golf game. It's just, well, now you've got this guy in an android, like in some kind of Starship Troopers suit right here. Why not? I mean, it's almost like we can do more of this, right? We've got Junko Ozawa's Birdie Try. We can't use this license overseas. How do we fix this? Let's just make him an android. They agree. Thank you, Toho. Thank you for publishing this and making such a rash decision right there. Pebble Beach Golf Links. All right, and here we have Craig Statler in the Saturn cover right in the bottom left. We're going to see more of him in a little bit. This is kind of they're excited about Pebble Beach. So is our friend Craig Statler here.
The real battle starts right now. Is pressure starting to get to you? Super shot.
Unfortunately, this is real.
Study my shot carefully and you'll learn a lot.
Maybe fortunately.
It's a really tough putt if the ball's above the hole. Gonna make it, leaving it short.
And here's your little coffee break when you're between holes, of course. You get some 19 fans. The sultry tones of Craig Statler giving you hints. He can tide us over. Just as good, we have Neo Turf Masters. The peak of the super get in, get out, match play golf tile right here from SNK. It's a Neo Geo staple. It's a tournament staple. There's not a whole lot left to be said. It's just get on the joystick, get that high or low hit on the driver.
Get it off that wing!
It's true. Same here to a certain extent. You can't go one step into certain parts of the country without seeing at least one Golden Tee golf. It might just be a derelict cabinet somewhere, but that's enough. It's nostalgic. It's also expensive. Some of these aren't as expensive. At this point, we get to some of the more recognizable series that you might have just seen going past, right past in a GameStop. We have bottom right, we have Mario Golf. What do you know? But also some stranger things, because we see the fusion of the wackier parts of mini golf and the early experiments bleeding into ostensibly serious stuff that was really standing out in the market, coming to CDs and now to Windows and PS1 and N64. We're going to get into some of this, and of course, we're going to get to some of the mascot golf stuff, which we'll see just shortly. First of all, though, what is this? What?
So this is one of those, like, in Japan, they had when they had the flip phones that were popular, they had a store where you can buy and download games like this. And there's a whole other panel could be dedicated to just this topic, but there's an active preservation effort going on for this. And as far as I know, this is not something that has been recovered yet.
They are working on it. Top men are working on it. Well, we don't have to work on this. We have Ninja Golf in spades. Yeah, it's what it looks like. In between every hole, you have to do a little side-scrolling beat 'em up. Good luck, guys. It's not very easy. It has had a recent remake, as far as I'm aware, and I've tried a little bit of that, and it's pretty fun. It lives up to it. This is a pretty box standard golf game, but you're wondering, why is it called Buick Dimension? We're not going into the Buick Dimension anytime soon. I fear what that would be like, but in the meantime, this was a sampler disc that you would get at a dealership or at car shows, and in addition to showing lots of schematics and promising a great test drive in your new Buick, you could play a golf game. This only makes sense because Buick had a long history working. I have to talk about Buick sponsoring golf championships for the longest time since like the 1950s, and that's the only reason that makes any sense. A big shout out to Wild Weasel's Golf Shrine. This is a website where Wild Weasel shows off the hundreds of golf games he's been collecting ever since COVID outbreak drove him to a kind of special place. That's what he tells me. Very great site, lots of cool articles there. Then we have this, which has appeared in previous MAGFest museums. It is one of the more interesting CDI games. It is a FMV-based mini golf title, and as you can see in the bottom left, you have to make some very simple choices about where you're going to actually hit the ball, and it's all very wacky and cartoony and kiddie, but for some reason they got Eugene Levy, of all comedians they could have chosen, to be kind of the main headliner for this. Good job, Phillips. You're very good at selling console software. Even T&E Soft wanted to get wacky. They made Valor Valley, Devil's Course. This had quite a few pretty good ports across different systems, and essentially it's just regular golf. It's just they have floating islands and lava flows and all sorts of other dastardly obstacles that get in the way of you trying to make a par 5 on this interminable course. And as I mentioned, that 3DO is going to be kind of a big deal here. We have multiple T&E Soft games on 3DO. Some of the best ports, even. Maxis made a golf game. Maxis made a golf game. They even had a course builder. They did make everything. In between Sim Earth and SimCity and SimCopter, you had a really bang solid set of just these more multimedia-driven titles, and Sim Golf was a natural candidate to fit into all of this. Front-page sports golf doesn't seem like it's initially going to be that outstanding, but it was the first game to really go all in on mouse control, using the mouse much in the same way that Golden Tee uses a trackball to get analog swing motion. You can now get away from the 3-click power bar system and just do everything with a mouse, real natural. This can lead to some funny incidents. Thanks again to Golf Shrine for capturing this moment where if you drag the mouse way too long, wait in one direction, you fall over. You do a little pratfall on the tee or out on the green. It happens to the best of us. Do I have to explain what's going on? This is what mini golf can become when your standards get this low. But I guess the profits are pretty high. I don't know about that, actually. GT Interactive, you might recall they published Doom and Quake and a variety of other big mid-90s DOS and PC games. This isn't one of the luminaries, but it counts in my special HUD. All right, so the big two, Hot Shots Golf and Mario Golf. What joins the two at birth? Well, it's Musashi Muramori, he's back. And he had a great idea. He was gonna make 3-click power bar golf for the PlayStation. It was gonna have cute characters. It was gonna be very accessible, but also just have enough simulation that even more experienced golf players could sit down and have a great time. This is a game for the dad and for the son and for the whole family. And he made the first game and realized, I don't wanna work at Camelot anymore. These guys are making RPGs. I wanna make sports games. So he found clap hands with a few other people who also leave with him. And Caroline realizes, oh, this game's selling really well and we just lost the guy who made it. Quick, get the Bible open. How did they make this? Boom. Well, they go to Nintendo and they make Mario Golf. And then the rest is history. But that's why we're here. So, golf games and mascot characters. Mascot golf. This even leads to Gex in being in a Hot Shots golf game. And if you can believe it, Gex is one of the best golfers in the whole game. He doesn't have silly quips, unfortunately. They didn't have. I know, but he does have silly animations, so it's almost there. Alongside Sweet Tooth and Sir Dan from Medieval. Interesting cameos right there. On the left, we've got Yakuza's Kazuma Kiryu and Jak and Daxter. That's in Hot Shots Golf 4, I believe. All right. Meanwhile, Mario Golf is an interesting case of where it used to have a wider roster of non-Mario characters right at the start, which was kind of a relic of when it was still based on Hot Shots Golf directly. These characters appear most prominently in the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance entries, which themselves were interesting because of how much of an RPG-style story mode they both tried to implement. You would take a particular character, go through various different events, build up their statistics, so you get better and better over time. This was the era of those more RPG-esque, more accessible but still particularly skill-based sports games, much like SSX and the Street series by EA Big on consoles right around that same time. We get the Sid Meier Sim Golf. Okay, this is another Sim Golf, and it's got a big head dude. What's up with this? You make a whole country club. You don't just make the golf course. You're making all the embellishments, all the facilities, and the infrastructure to get around. It's very much a tycoon game, and it was designed by Sid Meier at Firaxis. EA was getting straight into the middle of their Tiger Woods period by this point, but they still had some interesting diversions like this to color their library. You can even actually take this golfer you create out onto the green and into the facilities. Basically, you can choose another person who's actually at the place and say, hey, let's golf, let's duel. And that's pretty neat and all, but I want to talk about Fore for a second. Frog golf. It's what it sounds like. These cute little guys who, this isn't by the artist who, this is not Roddy Greenblatt of Parappa the Rapper and Jambalaya fame, but it looks somewhat similar in style, fittingly, and essentially these little guys are going to take hammers and they're going to hit the bellows and the frog is going to get hopped in whatever angle and direction you would normally try to drive the ball. These frogs have a mind of their own. If they see flies, they'll try to jump over and snap at the flies. They can get stuck in traps or get hunted down by other animals on the course. It's kind of wild and stuff. It's exactly the kind of Japan exclusive PS1 game that really, it's emblematic of that library and just how eclectic it would get. Now, thankfully, we did get the sequel over here in Rivet King. It is a different developer, but it's pretty much the same core artist and principles at play here as well. This had an extensive ad campaign. I recall seeing this in EGM at the time and thinking, yeah, Froth, okay. All right, let's get to God of War real quick. And now I'm realizing years later, I really would have loved to play this. It is the refined version of the same game. It has way more story cutscenes, which has some very charming voice acting and humor for the time. Just really great stuff. What is this, though? Yeah. I mean, I get that we've had Ninja Golf, we've had Frog Golf, we have Fast Food Golf now, it would seem. Except, this would actually be the one major Aqua Teen Hunger Force game to release on consoles, at least for the longest time. And of all the things, they chose to do a genre hybrid that would focus on, you do a little bit of basic free power bar golf, and then between holes, like in Ninja Golf, you have to beat up other onlookers and interlopers trying to get in the way of Master Shake, Frylock, and Meatwad. And Carl is there, don't worry. And it is fully voiced over. I believe it actually came with a smattering of the actual show recordings, various bits and bobs on the whole DVD. Very late PS2 release, but definitely one of the interesting highlights from its later years. Meanwhile, we have a pretty interesting little history bit here. These two paintings right here, they look like it's Thomas Kincaid on a bender thinking he can do fantasy art, but these were by a somewhat notable golfer named Bud Chapman, who made the infamous 18 series of paintings. These are golf courses that cannot happen. Theoretically, they could happen, but they're really not going to happen. So that essentially leads to this developer realizing they can make a game out of this. If I go, this is a long video, but I know where I want to go. Theoretically, I do. Work with me, Wi-Fi. Yes, here we go. So you can even golf on top of Wall Street if you really felt like it.
Infamous golf hole number 17, Wall Street Golf and Cricket Club, 85 yards, par 2. Designed by Sir Peregrine Honeycutt, OKE, this hole with its large concave green has been the scene of many aces, none by Sir Peregrine, who remains angry and frustrated, since his design was aimed at achieving his lifelong ambition, a hole in one. Indeed, many of his awry shots have resulted in largish lawsuits, by damaged pedestrians far below. Number 18 handicap.
Yeah, I've heard of Penthouse Suites, but this is taking it quite a bit far. Oh, okay, and... They aren't all beautiful. We have, it is an all ages panel technically, so I was cagey about showing screenshots of Outlaw Golf narrated by Steve Carell, because what we need are edgy quips in between shots and bogeys about how things aren't going very well for you. There's a system in this game where if you do particularly poorly for an extended period of time, your golfer gets mad and eventually starts beating up the caddy, because violence is fun. Violence doesn't happen in Pro Golfer Saru. It's an adaptation of it is a video game adaptation of a well-known sports manga in Japan that got terrible, terrible, terrible ratings, especially from Famitsu, as told on this YouTube video. You can look it up, Pro Golfer Saru. It is a very good video going into just how much the game did not capture from the manga it was based on, even though the game is largely functional. There were plenty of duds I had to at least leave out of the panel for obvious reasons, especially because we get to some of the more interesting stuff. Say hello to Wide Jeremy here in the bottom left. This is what character creators can do to you when you aren't careful. There's no Oblivion Golf that I know of, but maybe that could happen too. Yes, we have the transition towards HD fidelity and modeling and texturing and effects, and how all that just makes life a lot harder for developers. But also some developers were up to the challenge. In the top right, we have a DS game. We have even more alternate controls, stylus controls. Why not? And going into even as recent as now, we finally have another big contender for who's making the popular yearly sports golf game, and that's 2K going up against EA finally. And you know, you can play games online. What a crazy idea. Who would do that? I guess we could also hang out with Tiger Woods for a bit. Easily the biggest golfing star of the last few decades. Sorry, Rory McIlroy. I know EA tried to make your golf game happen, but it went back to Tiger Woods for a reason. Cyber Tiger is not a super standout of a game, but it's a great example of just the media blitz surrounding his preeminence at the time. This is an interesting example of T&E Soft, once one of the bastions of just really bang solid golf simulations, starting to fall into dire times. This was originally Golf Paradise, but when it came overseas, they got the license from Disney to actually try and make this sell better. There was a lot of competition early in the PS2's life for a variety of sports titles. T&E Soft did a near-launch golf title, and this was the follow-up. Well, yeah, you can golf yourself if you try. I'm not going to golf with Goofy anytime soon. I'm sorry. We have to move on to swingers golf, which has no swinging. That's the one in the window. And this is not by T&E Soft. This is actually by Telenet. I think I had offline mode on when I was editing this panel, so that's an oopsie, sorry. Telenet made this, and it's one of their last games before the company went defunct. By that point, people from Telenet had moved on to other studios working on RPG games, such as Camelot, and I believe some people went to Atlas. But T&E Soft was a GameCube exclusive at a time when a lot of these games were trying to go multi-platform. It's a pretty bang solid game in its own right, published by Eidos in their ill-fated attempts to start an edgy label called Fresh Games. And, well, didn't pan out quite that well. Link's 2004 from 2003, because years don't have to match anymore. It says the indie belt. This was actually the last full Link's game made by the artist formerly known as Access Software and the Carver brothers. And it is probably the best one to just jump into right now if you can get access to Xbox hardware and the game itself. Really solid customization and career options. It had Xbox Live support. This was a big deal. Even the Dreamcast, with its extensive online features before, didn't quite have a golf game that could take advantage of broadband Ethernet the way this one did. Meanwhile, if we're talking about online, it doesn't get more online than an MMO. And what about a golf MMO? This started life as Albatross 18, and then it got renamed to Pangyo. This is by the South Korean developer Intrive, and it looks a lot like Hot Shots Golf. It plays a lot like Hot Shots Golf. It just lets you customize your golfer avatar a lot more than before, and you can set up party rooms and instances to do tournaments and such. Very fun. Got a PSP game with some more extensive single-player features to fit that audience as well. It is probably one of my easiest recommendations to make just for a jump right in and have fun golfing title. Do I have to explain Wii Sports?
What's Boost?
Oh, I'm sorry you were in Plato's Cave for 2 decades. Let's go. I'm glad to bring you out. People, I don't even have to mention that this game has a speedrunning community just for the golf sequence itself. Shout out to Summoning Salt. So, Wii Sports Resort largely iterated upon what Wii Sports golf mode had. It had a Frisbee Golf of all things. That's the one Frisbee Golf game in this presentation. I'm sorry to the Frisbee Golf fans.
One thing you may not have known about this is this has the exact same tracks or courses as original NES Golf.
Yes, if you look at the comparison right here, it's the same course layouts that Iwata had implemented all the way back in 1984. Yeah. We Love Golf is the one Mario Golf game that's not Mario Golf. Let me explain. This is Camelot, of course, and it's published by Capcom, and they realized, oh, well, we're doing motion controls, and they've already got Wii Sports as a launch title. We can't really just do another Mario Golf, or we can't pitch that as easily. So let's go to this other company and use their characters instead. So we have Jill Valentine golfing. I believe there's Ace Attorney characters as well. I couldn't quite fit that in on the slide. You can have a Ken skin if you really try. It's a pretty solid game. We do love golf. Do we love Kinect? Any Kinect fans in the audience? Yeah. All right, we got a few. Yeah, let's go. All right, Rare made this. It's a whole collection.
He loves Kinect. He plays Sonic Free Riders every day.
There we go, Sonic Free Riders.
I love Kinect just because I'm going to yell at my Xbox that does things.
Yelling at the Xbox to make it do things is a good way to use the hardware. Also, I mean, it's a straightforward iteration on what Wii Sports was doing. And you've got some more. And you've got more room to do. You had the avatars in Xbox 360, so kaboom. Top Golf exists. We see this in every other metropolitan area at this point, or every other suburb, it seems. And it fills an important niche. You get to do a driving range, which is the batting cages equivalent for this whole sport. You also have not just you have these simulator suites that are great just for the driving range, and at other golf country clubs, of which there's so many examples I could potentially have put in here. You have a variety of full-blown golf simulations that let you get a feel for the course before you go out, and obviously those have never gone out of style. We have a bunch of more recent games that really kind of fill in a bunch of niches. In the top right, we actually have another example of the speedrunning scene. That's for Golf It, which is kind of the other competitor to Golf with Your Friends, just with more advanced physics and really evil ideas for a golf game. And then in the bottom right, we have an example of the Golf Club 2, I believe. This is the series that has become PGA Golf 2K, 2X, insert wherever year. And so we have probably the most extensive course builder you can get in today's golfing game scene. Just endless options for how to customize and tailor it to whatever audience you're going to have play the whole course. What, the golf? I feel like this kind of explains what it's self-explanatory to an extent. It essentially asks, what if you made golf into more of a triathlon of other different mini games? And of course, we still have some exclusive golf games. We have Golf Story for Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, less said about the sequel, the better, but at least we still have this, an excellent iteration on what Mario Golf's handheld games started, really introduced to players, just with build up your RPG character campaign and having a bit more character, a lot more flavored dialogue this time around as well, just to give something else to sink into in between building up all your statistics and just going at it. It's just great to see a top-down golf game get this kind of quality and success in the modern day as well. Of course, we have this, PGA Tour 2K23. This is the successor, as I mentioned, to the Golf Club series, which is probably it's the equivalent to, say, Assetto Corsa or Automobilista. That would be for racing fans. This is doing that for a lot of the hardcore golf fans. Curse to Golf is a great example of how the roguelite phenomenon has affected even something as seemingly mundane as golf of all things. We've got some branching paths. We've got a bunch of reasons to replay the game because you're going to have to eventually go over par and things go very badly. It is an excellent little title. Definitely recommend it. And finally, topping it off, from this year we have 4D Golf, and it's what it sounds like. It is MD Escher Golf. You can build a mini golf course that breaks all the known rules of geometry and projection if you feel like it. You could also play it straight, but I don't know why you do it. It's 4D Golf. Presumably there's time travel. I need to play more to know that for sure. Just quickly go over the sources. We do have a little. We are hitting the hour, but as far as I know, there's no panel after us. So thankfully, that means it is time for some Q&A. But before I get to that, some parting words from our friend. Some of you are waiting for this.
2 to the 1, 2 to the 1, 2 to 3. I'd like great shots. Good birdie. I don't like conservatively, just a little. Game pressure, consistency. 3, 2 to 4, 2 to 5, 2 to the putt. Today is make or break. Can you make the cut? I've got a great eagle. Hole number 9. Think you can get it inside mine? Try your best in that. Study my shot. I've got to catch my rivals a lot quicker than I thought. Great, I can get my second shot on the green from here. The real battle starts now at Pebble Beach. I've really enjoyed playing 4 days of golf with you. Now, drain that putt with me. Drain that putt with me. Don't give up. Drain that birdie with me. Hit that shot for me. My best shot.
Golf game YouTube poop, everyone.
Cut driver.
All right. Okay, there you go. Who has questions? Raise your hands. In the back.
Not really a question, but like a fitting comment.
Okay.
Golf is doing a Sonic collab right now.
That is right.
5 minutes away, so
Yes, Topgolf is doing a Sonic collab.
a lot of fun actually.
I need to try that. You, sir.
Have you seen the TGL golf, that like interactive giant golf simulator that ESPN like teaming up with?
Oh,
It's basically esports for golf with real golfers.
yes. The question is, have I seen the TGL esports golf product that ESPN is doing in conjunction with, I believe, PGA Tour, or
Some Saudi run thing. Or
okay, some other international series. I haven't seen that yet. I need to get caught up on like the last few years of like the major events and broadcasting phenomena. That sounds pretty interesting, though. Thank you for the suggestion. You, sir.
You talked about Dream Course. Have you played Special Tee Shot? What do you think of it? Is it better or worse for having less of the enemies that stuff?
So the question was, have I played? What was it again?
Special Tee Shot?
Special Tee Shot. This is Golden Tee, right?
No, it was a prototype of Dream Course that was later released
Oh, Kirby's Dream Course. My bad.
as a television title.
Yeah. So the question was, have I played the prototype, the alternate version of Kirby's Dream Course? So this is Special Dream Shot, I believe, right? Special Tee Shot. Have I played that? I have played more. I have played a little bit of that. I spent more time with Golf Daisuki OB Club personally, just because that has a bit variety, more environmental variety. I like to mess around in that game with. It goes into space. I mean, mini golf in space is hard to beat. Kirby does get pretty wild though. Is that one that you have to have loaded a special module or a set of broadcast ROM for Satellaview?
No, it's just I never did it.
I see. All right. In the right, you sir, right there.
Can we go back one? Sorry, I didn't get the picture of the.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'll link on this for you right now. Who else has a question? Yes, sir.
I guess this is for you two.
Okay.
What's your personal favorite golf games?
That's a good question.
It doesn't have to be like your favorite, but like maybe just the top 3.
Right. Oh, so the question is just what is our own favorite golf games, and so my go-to personally, just for having grown up with it a lot of the time, it would be Hot Shots Golf 4. it's either between that or OpenT2 on PSP, which I play through a friend's machine for quite a bit. They just have an extensive amount of, they have the guest characters. They're obviously pretty fun to mess around with, but just some really well-designed courses, just lots of ways to approach each hole, and because they have full fleshed out career modes, I can try out a bunch of different gear combinations on different characters to see what results I get. It's got some good party-ish side modes as well, and modifiers you can add. It feels like weather conditions and the season you're in actually makes a big difference in terms of, okay, the wind it's a lot windier on average, or when I do a low shot going under, I'm actually going to roll the ball a lot more than if I try to go up high or just in a straight shot. Things like that add up, and it just gets a really nuanced experience, but it's not overbearing either.
I can't say I've experienced too many golf games, so I'd probably have to say either like the classic Wii Sports Golf, or one I played semi-recently, the Mario Golf, the Game Boy Color. I really liked the RPG aspect of that.
Yeah.
Just, and I still intend to like level up my character enough to where you can transfer it to the N64 and then be OP.
Yes, that is the thing you can do in that game. We're still taking questions. I'll be taking questions for what? It's 12:07. Yeah, I can do a few more. Let's go. Right in the back.
On modern hardware, what golf game should I go play right now?
On modern hardware. So the question is, on modern hardware, what golf game should I go play right now? Which modern hardware do you have? Anything. For mini golf, I mentioned Golf with Your Friends is very popular. I'm partial to Golf It, which is, I mentioned that's a somewhat known competitor. It's definitely a bit more hardcore, but it has a very good course builder. So just in terms of longevity for modding purposes, like if you want to do some 40 golf on a budget, you can do it in Golf It, I'm pretty sure, just without the crazy effects. On a console, you really can't go wrong with the recent Mario Golf on Switch. It has had some mixed opinions, but it is very, very polished. Sure, right in front.
Which game had the best mini golf game inside of it? Mini game type of.
Okay.
What's your opinion? What do you think is the best?
So the question is, which other game had the best mini golf mode embedded inside it? And
It could be mini golf. It could be normal golf.
it could be, or just any kind of golf in general. Not easy to answer that one. I will say the one that immediately comes to mind, Super Monkey Ball 2, I believe Super Monkey Ball 2 didn't have a great one, so I'm gonna have to discount that, put it aside. There is a golf mode in there's a mini golf mode in Hot Shots 1 for PS1 that's actually is better than it has any right to be, being just a side mode to the main deal. I've played a lot of that. I can easily recommend it. There's also, I believe, what my absolutely deranged take is, no, I can't say that because that's a whole Rugrats game that's just mini golf. Sorry, never mind. I mean, I don't know. Some people might want to hear about that. In the green mask, right back.
So, what are your top 2 golf game soundtracks? Games that you have
Right.
really used the most?
Yes, so the question is, what are my favorite golf game soundtracks? And this is tricky because we have Motoi Sakuraba is one of the primary composers of memorable golf game music that I can think of. He worked on the original Hot Shots Golf and then was retained for future Mario Golf installments with Camelot because he worked with the Camelot Software Planning's audio engineer a lot of the time. So if we're just going to say restricted to Mario Golf, honestly, N64 is really well done. I agree. There's just a great amount of variety. All the chops that he and Masaki Uno brought to Mario Tennis around the same time. It's on full oral display in that game as well. Easy answer, honestly. Sure, right there.
You mentioned the speedrunning for the Wii Sports Golf. How is the speedrunning community in terms of like golfing games? Like I know most games can speedrun. I don't have
Yeah.
heard category, whether that community is active or not. So,
Okay.
what would you say are like the most active, I guess, golf leagues?
Okay. So the question was, what is the current state and makeup of the speedrunning community for golf video games, be it some of the more casual or what better known ones or some of the deeper cuts? Wii Sports obviously gets the lion's share of attention. I know that some people have taken a liking to Kirby's Dream Course as well on the mini golf side of things. I do want to see more hot shots speedrunning going into the future. I feel like there is a lot of potential there, especially the later entries which add speed golf in as a side mode. Speed golf is also a big thing for Tiger Woods Pro. I believe if you go all the way back to not Cyber Tiger. Of all the things I forgot to put a slide in for, I forgot to put a slide in for Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2004. That particular PGA Tour has a really good speed golf mode that would be very conducive to just running through, and also just a really good career mode. That's kind of the early peak of the whole series for a lot of people, just because of how well it balances. It's the Simcade golf game of choice for people. It's much like what Gran Turismo 4 would be to people who love that kind of game. You have a question?
This is much fun. I guess, have you ever played any of those like top tracer golf things at like a golf school? Yeah, but like.
You mean like the ones where like you're in front of like a green screen, like the new golfing competitions they're doing, where it like where you literally like cut a ball and it matches it on the screen.
Yeah, I think that would be like one person.
Are these multiplayer or like single player affairs that you're referencing?
No, this is in person.
I mean like
Yeah.
golf driving.
So the question in this case would be, have I played at any of those club-based or Top Golf adjacent golf simulation booths that have sprung up? And I did that once it was basically with a high school friend back when those were still becoming a thing. It's been many years since I tried them, and they have become more sophisticated. In terms of like commercial alternatives, I'm surprised to see it's not so much a dearth of VR golf games. We saw about mini golf, but that's mini golf, so I don't know about full-blown traditional golf in this case. But the functionality and performance, so far as I've seen, is rather lacking compared to what it should be, especially for a sport that is theoretically much more lenient for VR users and less headache-inducing than it would be for other sports. I would definitely like to try some more of those. I've got, realistically, time for one or two more questions, or we all just, you sir, one more.
Do you or have you played real golf out on the court?
No.
Back to basics.
No, I would like to try it at some point.
It's a lot, but it's fun.
Yes, I would like to.
Driving ranges.
I've done that. I think I've done that.
Yeah, we have done the driving ranges before. The most golf course interaction I had, the most memorable moment for me was when I was younger and it snowed all over the links, or just the local public course. And my parents were like, all right, it's snow in Texas. Let's go out and sled.
Do you watch golf?
Yeah, so on occasion I do watch some of, I usually just go for the clip show highlights. And those are pretty fun.
Oh yeah.
It's like watching Formula One for me. I try to avoid the Netflix show because I know that's going to be overly dramatic, but I'll find something like some fan compilation, and that will do the trick for me.
I just like golf course.
Yeah, that does sound pretty fun. All right, well, it's a long MAGFest night, and I gotta get going too. So, thank you. All right.